we start at the beginning, Carmichael? Could you share some aspects of your personal story and background and the path that led you to the founding of Material Impact?
My pleasure to do so. So if I go back in my background, I guess most people would probably start with school. I'm gonna go back a little further than that, even just a little bit here, because I think it'd be relevant if any young folks ever are looking at this, and it's important to say. So I grew up in New York. What's interesting is I was the first in my family to go to college, but I should also say I my parents at a very young age got divorced. Both of my parents, who I love dearly. My father's no longer alive, and and after that, I'd say I spent a period of time in my life not living with my mother or my father. I was, affectionately custody of the family, so to speak. And I say
Hmm.
this in a really good way because I had a great childhood, but it was very unusual. I spent time living with my aunt or my uncle or my grandmother, back to my aunt, my uncle. Eventually, as I got older, I ended up back with my father, who got remarried, and from there. But it was a non-traditional thing that really shaped me quite a bit, because I think as an only child, as I was bouncing around and going from atmosphere to atmosphere, I had to be extremely observant and learn and understand people. And you really hone in. And I should also say, I don't come from a family with a lot of money. I also, for a period of time, lived in a situation on welfare, food stamps, support by the government, that sort of stuff. Again, don't cry for me. I had a awesome time at that time because I was well loved and had lots of friends. But certainly from an economic background that you wouldn't imagine, a straight line to what I'm doing right now. And from there, I would say I learned a lot, and also was in some pretty rough neighborhoods for a period of time until I ended up out in Long Island. I learned a ton, and flipped to the other side. Ended up at Duke University as a undergraduate, went straight through in grad school, and was on track to be a professor from that situation. So you talk about a contrast of things and across training and learning. And I think all of this sort of spills into who I am, how I think about my career. And in the sciences, I got my PhD in chemistry with a focus on materials. And I'm sitting in Boston now. And what brought me to Boston is I was at Harvard. I was a National Science Foundation fellow. There were 30 of us in the country in chemistry. I don't know for sure, but I'm guessing I was perhaps the only one of color at that point in time. And even in the chemistry department at Harvard, out of 400 or so students and so forth, there were definitely less than 5 of us who were of color. So, that situation, loved it, by the way. Had a phenomenal time all the way through my, PhD. Of course, there's all sorts of stories I could tell of bumps in the road, but overall, really a great time. And met one of my closest friends in the world, George Whitesides, who is, he was my mentor and advisor, and and now just a wonderful dear friend. For many years, we started several companies as co-entrepreneurs together, and eventually got into the venture business, where he and I have stayed really close together. So that's a bit of my background. I should say, fast forward from being an entrepreneur, learning how to be CEO of companies. I did that. I eventually backed into venture capital because I have this, unusual thesis in material science. I have this, unusual first name in Carmichael that people will remember you. And I think the venture capital community remembered me. And just in general, I made some very good friends in venture. We worked on companies together that they backed, and eventually recruited me into Northbridge Venture Partners, where I was a full general partner there, coming in and learned the basis of the venture business there, and then later started Material Impact. So that's in a nutshell a lot I can fill in there, but I did want to start off with my earlier days,